something shifted. And I think everybody can at least sort of feel it. The weekends, they don't recharge you the way they used to. Music plays, but for some reason it doesn't move you. You're watching movies, but you don't feel like you're inside them. You're on a date, but mentally you're somewhere else. You're resting, but rest doesn't even reach you anymore. And nobody can quite explain what changed. Folks have theories. They say it's the economy. They say it's perhaps social media. Some say it's AI. Some complain of burnout. Some people say folks are just getting older. And honestly, I think they all play a role. But none of that is really the real answer. I think what's really happening here is life did not lose its magic. You just got buried. You just got buried. Your consciousness got buried under noise. It got buried under performance, comparison, and even constant mental surveillance until you couldn't feel your own life anymore. There was a time when people actually landed in their experiences. You went outside and you were actually outside. You heard a song and you felt like you were inside the music. You sat with someone and you were actually with them. And now you're physically present and mentally in 12 different places at once. You're thinking about what you should be doing. You're thinking about what you should be posting, who's watching, who's ahead of you, who's judging, what this looks like from the outside. That is not living. What that is surveillance. Surveillance of your own life. And here's the truth. When your mind is constantly watching your life instead of living it, everything starts to feel hollow. Not because life is hollow, but because you are no longer touching it directly. You're meeting life through fear, through comparison. You're meeting life through performance, through the ego asking, how does this look? Instead of the soul asking, how does this feel? That one shift from feeling to performing changes everything. You see, that's why life doesn't hit the same, because you're not fully inside your own experiences anymore. You're standing outside of yourself, watching yourself live. And a life you're only observing will never feel as real as a life you're actually living. A lot of people are not just tired. A lot of people are grieving. A lot of people are grieving the life they were promised, the one that never actually showed up. Think about the script most people were handed. Go to school, get a good job, work hard, buy a house, start a family, build something stable, retire one day. That was the agreement. And people didn't just follow the script. They built their identity on it. They thought, if I do these steps, life will eventually make sense. But now, the steps don't lead where they used to lead. You can follow every rule and still be drowning in debt. You can grind every day and still not afford a normal life. You can do everything right and still feel like the floor is moving underneath you. And that creates something deeper than frustration. It creates inner panic because the ego needs a formula. The ego needs to know, if I do this, I get that. But the modern world broke that agreement and nobody sent a memo. So now people are trying to play a game where the rules changed mid-game. Now, AI is coming in and threatening careers people spent years preparing for. Now, prices keep rising. Stability feels like a luxury. Relationships, they feel fragile. The future feels less like something you build towards and more like something you're just trying to survive. People aren't just asking, why am I exhausted? They're asking for something deeper, something darker. What was this all even for? That right there, it's not just an economic crisis. That is a spiritual crisis wearing an economic mask. But here's the question nobody's asking. What if the blueprint was never supposed to be your foundation in the first place? What if it gave you structure, but it also gave you a cage? Because when your entire life is built on a script someone else handed you, you never stop long enough to ask, is this actually my path? Or am I just following directions? And that's where most people get trapped. And it's not because they're lazy, no. It's not because they're weak, but because they were taught to obey a path before they were taught to hear themselves. So yes, the old blueprint collapsed, but maybe that collapse isn't just a loss. Maybe it's an invitation. An invitation not to panic, but to finally stop living from script and start living from consciousness. People keep saying they lost their joy, but I don't think joy disappeared. I think your nervous system is fried. There's a big difference. Listen to how people describe it. I'm not depressed, but nothing excites me. I still do things, but nothing really lands. I travel, but it feels like I'm just collecting footage. I'd rest, but I feel guilty the whole time. I'm surrounded by people, but I still feel completely alone. That is not normal. That is numbness. And numbness is what happens when a system absorbs too much stimulation for too long. It finally just shuts down to protect itself. Look at what the modern person consumes in a single day. They watch videos. They watch news over and over and over again, drama, people's opinions, music, podcasts, messages, notifications, comment sections, an endless stream of other people's lives, highlights, arguments, and performances. The mind is eating all day, chomp, 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 but the soul is starving. That's the part people miss. You can be entertained and still be empty. You can be informed and still be disconnected from yourself. You can drown in content and never once make contact with who you actually are. And then people wonder why simple things don't feel good anymore. It's because your brain has been trained to need intensity. Silence feels threatening. Peace feels suspicious. A quiet day feels like failure. Stillness feels like you're falling behind. But here's the thing. Stillness isn't creating the emptiness. Stillness is just revealing what was already there. That's why people run from silence. It's not because it's boring, but because it's honest. And most people don't want honesty. They want distraction with better lighting. But once silence gets honest with you, you've got two choices. You can run back to the noise and keep the cycle going, or you can sit with it. Sit with it long enough to hear what your inner self has been trying to tell you for months, perhaps years. Most people don't need more content. They don't need more entertainment. They need less interference. They need space. They need quiet. They need to remember what their own thoughts sound like before the algorithm starts speaking for them. You are not empty because life has no meaning. You feel empty because your attention has been shredded, scattered into 1,000 directions that have nothing to do with this moment. And the present moment is the only place life can actually touch you. You know, the phone isn't just a phone anymore. For most people, it's become a second mind. And that second mind is louder, it's faster, it's more aggressive than the real one. Think about how deep this actually goes. Before people even know how they feel, they check the internet to see what everyone else feels. Before they decide what they want, they see what's trending. Before they enjoy a moment, they're already wondering if it should be filmed. Before they trust their own instincts, they run it past comments, likes, reactions, and strangers on a screen. That's not staying connected, that's outsourcing your mind. And the most dangerous part is most people don't even notice it's happening. The screen tells you what you want. It tells you what to fear. It tells you who to envy. It tells you what your body should look like, what your relationship should look like, what your success should look like, what your whole life should look like. And then you look at actual life and you feel like something is wrong with it. But maybe your life isn't wrong. Maybe your perception has been hacked. Maybe you don't hate your life. Maybe you hate the fake version of life you keep comparing it to. Because when you're constantly measuring your real, messy, unfiltered life against the curated highlight reels of other people's lives, your own life starts feeling small. Not because it's small, but because you've been trained to compare your realities to someone else's performance. And the ego loves this game. The ego lives for it. You're behind. You're not enough. Hey, you need to prove more, show more. You need to become more visible. And before long, you're not living your life. You're producing your life. That is the modern cage. No bars, no locks, no walls, just attention. Constant attention. Because where your attention goes, your life force goes. When your attention is constantly being pulled into screens, arguments, other people's drama, curated fantasies, and manufactured outrage, you have less life force for your actual life. That's why everything feels faded. Your energy is being spent in places your body never even goes. So when people say life doesn't feel real anymore, maybe it's because they haven't been touching reality. They've been touching a screen about reality. And until you take your attention back, you will keep feeling like a stranger in your own life. Here's one of the darkest shifts in modern life, and barely anyone ever talks about it. People feel like they cannot exist anymore without turning themselves into a product. It used to be enough to have a skill. Now, you have to have a brand. It used to be enough to just live your life. Now, you have to package it. You don't just have thoughts anymore. You have to turn them into content. You don't just go through pain. You wonder if the pain could be monetized. You don't just have a personality. You engineer it into a platform. And slowly but surely, quietly, without realizing it, you stop being a person and you transform into a product. The self was never meant to be a product. The self was meant to be experienced. It was meant to observe, to create, to love, to grow, to become more aware of itself over time. But the modern world, society, flipped that and said, turn yourself into something people can consume. And that right there is why so many people are running on empty. Not physically exhausted, spiritually exhausted. Because they're not living their life. They're managing the image of their life. Full time, no days off. That is the parasocial trap no one warned you about. Everyone watching everybody. Everyone selling something. Everyone performing for an invisible audience. But being seen is not the same as being known. Being followed is not the same as being connected. Being consumed is not the same as being loved. That's why somebody can be watched by thousands and still feel like no one actually sees them. That's why people can get validation all day long and still feel completely hollow at night. Because attention is not nourishment. Attention is just noise. Unless it's connected to something real. So when people say life doesn't hit the same anymore, what they're really saying underneath it all is, I miss being a person. I just miss being a person, not a brand, not a profile, not a performance, not a content machine. A person. A human being who can sit in a moment without needing to turn it into something. Someone who can feel something without asking, what does this mean for my image? Someone who can just exist without constantly having to prove they exist. And that is the real uncaging. It's not about escaping the world. No, it's about escaping the programming that keeps you from feeling the world. Life didn't lose its meaning. You were simply trained to look for meaning everywhere except within yourself. So maybe the answer isn't more stimulation. Maybe the answer is not more content, more noise. Maybe the answer is to get quiet enough to feel again. To stop performing long enough to be present again. To stop comparing long enough to actually see your own path. Because life still hits. It hits hard. But it only hits when you're actually there to receive it. If you found something in this video that sparked a thought, shifted your perspective, or just made you feel more grounded, consider showing some love by buying me a coffee. It helps fuel the channel, keeps the uploads coming, and lets me know that the content matters to you. The link's right below in the description or on my channel banner. No pressure, just appreciation if you're moved to support. And as always, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. I am Tony Victory, a wolf uncaged. Thank you. Peace.